What if I fall? That was the thought that ran through my mind as I drove my car to the edge of the bridge. I stepped out and I looked down. It was the year 2020. The world had turned upside down, and I felt like I had failed once again. At the beginning of the year, I had lost my job due to the pandemic. This was a time when I felt like I was supposed to have everything together. I was supposed to have my loans paid off. I was supposed to be able to support myself financially and not have to rely on others. During that time in 2020, I saw people who look just like me being murdered. During that time, I didn't get all the financial support that I needed from the government. And during that time, I tried to start a new business and I failed to get clients. And when I finally did get another job, I was so burned out, so mentally exhausted, so emotionally and spiritually exhausted that my mental state was in ruin. And this wasn't the first time I felt like this. When I was in high school, I had to take the ACT and get a certain score in order to go to the school of my choice. And I failed to get that score. Not just one time, but 7 times. When I was in PT school, I was one of the few people repeatedly in the bottom of my class. I remember being called into the office. I walked in, sat down opposite of the student board and the academic board. My head held low, my eyes downcast. The thought that went through my mind, I'm failing. Once again. Once again, I had failed to meet expectations, my own and other people's. Once again. And then I had to get licensed and take the licensure exam. What happened? I failed. Not once, but twice. Each time more devastating, each one scarring me more, each one forcing me to go into the car and cry. The entirety of my failures, the heaviness of my fatigue, and the darkness of the world culminated to a point as I looked over the edge, stepped out at the end of the year 2020. And as I looked down, the weight of my failure seemed to push me down more than the weight of gravity. But something stopped me that day. Perhaps it was the fierceness of life. Perhaps it was God. But I stopped for a second more. I took a breath and I breathed. And I decided to take back control. Later, I decided to get help through counseling. I reached out to others who would speak life into me. I began to gain momentum inch by inch, step by step, an agonizing step, and sometimes beautiful step. And it took multiple tries. And during that time, I began to accept a simple truth. Failures will happen, and I will fail. And that simple truth led me to a place and answer that I did not expect to go. It led me to an answer that would help free me from the shackles of expectation. And the answer I found was forgiveness. In order for me to move forward from the weight of my failures, I had to have a heavier weight of self-forgiveness. To forgive oneself is not easy. It requires you to face every fault that you have, requires you to stare at them. You have to acknowledge them. And it requires you to accept them, accept your faults, and love yourself in spite of them. This is not easy. And it was not easy for me. I had to make a decision every day to be kind to myself, to understand that perfection was a false goal and that forgiveness and failure was a more worthy and achievable goal. This all took work. Counseling, moments of tears, days of tears, and mass encouragement from others. What if I fall? That's the question that continued to sound in my ears. But for me, that journey was all worth it. For when I had the courage to forgive myself, because it does require courage, the warmth that radiated from it, the lightness I felt in my chest, and the peace that I experienced, it was restorative. It buffered me from the pain, and it built a resilience that I could not have gained if I continued to fall to my failures. And from that place of forgiveness, I had room to breathe and look up and create a new vision for myself. A vision is something that you see but simultaneously may not yet exist. It is grand or it is focused. It has the power to pull you forward one step at a time. I traveled with my best friend in the year 2016 after a trip to the mountains. We were just beginning to know and understand each other. During that car ride, I asked him a question that I often ask many people. I wanted to see what his vision was. If you were perfected, what would you look like? I asked that because I wanted to know what he thought of himself. He stopped, gave the question thought, and answered. And then he explained to me the vision of what he saw himself to be. Then he turned around and asked me the same question. Well, what about you? If you were perfected at this point, what would you look like? I smiled. I loved that question. Once I began to forgive myself, the vision of who I wanted to be reshaped in my mind's eye. I have always wanted to change the world in some way. I have always wanted to be a resting place for others, to be light and warmth to those who are in darkness, to be like the wind and freely move to places where other people may not be able to reach, to be like water, giving life to places I touch. And I had the vision of succeeding, of becoming something more than I am now. And the vision allowed me to look up towards the sky. And when I looked up towards the sky, when I looked forward, that's when hope began anew. A vision leads to hope, hope for the future, hope that you can make it. From the safety and space of self-forgiveness and the drive from my vision, I had a renewed hope that I would make it. Hope allowed me to smile again. And when my mind said, I don't think I can, hope said, oh, but you will. You can. You must. When I saw how much further up this mountain of failures and mountain of life that I had to climb, hope reminded me of the lesson of self-forgiveness, that it takes courage to fail and try, and to fail and try, and to fail and try, and fail and try again. And as I failed and tried further up this mountain, and hope restored the vision of where I wanted to be and of who I wanted to be, of where I could be and of who I could be, and where I must be and who I must be. And when I finally reached the mountaintop, I stopped, I looked back and saw just how far I had come. Because although I failed 7 times in high school with the ACT test, the 8th time I succeeded and was able to go to the college of my choice. And although I was in the bottom of my class, I did graduate. And although I failed the licensure exam twice, I passed the 3rd time and became a therapist who has changed and who is changing thousands of people's lives. And although misfortune fell upon me in 2020, I survived. I wrote a book and became stronger and became brighter. My failure led to forgiveness. Forgiveness led to a vision, and vision led to hope. And hope allowed me to look forward. And I stared at the sight from the top of the mountain to the things that I could become, and the anthem that continued to ring in my ears, its words that lifted my chin and beat through my chest, was Aaron Hansom's poem. There is freedom waiting for you on the breezes of the sky. And you ask, what if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly?